Welcome back, Generals. The purpose of this video is to show you how to develop 10 two-star units before Shiloh. Consider this video a supplement to the Union Reforged campaign. I know your time is valuable, so thank you so much for checking out my materials related to the game. I hope you find something useful to help you succeed in your own campaigns. Do not hesitate to ask questions in the comments. And yes, I said 10 two-star units before Shiloh, not just the initial 8 that you make before Distress Call. The other 2 will be the units that you make after Distress Call before going to Bull Run. I admit this is not easy, and it requires you to minimize casualties while maximizing your kills. For demonstration purposes, this particular campaign is on Legendary difficulty, but I've done the exact same thing on Major General difficulty multiple times. Technically, it should work on Major General Light and the lower difficulty levels. However, since you're facing smaller AI units there, you'll have fewer enemies to kill. You may need to pull off some of your allies early in order for your core units to get the kills. I chose Tactician, Cavalry, and Army to start the campaign, which results in 3 in training, 2 in Army organization, 1 in logistics, and 4 in reconnaissance. You can take whatever you wish, but I've never done this with less than 4 in recon. I'm sure other combinations are possible. I'm just showing you what has worked for me. Do not play Phlippi conservatively, just trying to preserve your core units. We need the experience, so kill as much as possible with your troops while using the allies as shield to tank shots. Ideally, my troops would fire as soon as every battle started and kill or capture the last unit on the field with 1 second remaining on the clock. Why? Because more time in battle equals more experience gained. You could fight the exact same battle 2 times and have the exact same number of kills and captures, but the one that fought for the longest will have gained more unit stats and XP than the one that finished early due to how unit stats are increased. So let's look at those quick. Morale increases with time in battle. Stamina increases with movement and reloading. So the more moving and the more shooting, the more stamina goes up. Firearms increases with loading and firing. Again, the more shots taken, the more the firearm stat improves. Efficiency and melee are the only 2 that are tied to kills. So it doesn't really matter how fast you kill, just as long as you kill or capture everything that's there. My player casualties at Phlippi were 50 killed, 161 wounded, and 16 missing. Total Union casualties were 1,711 infantry and 1 artilleryman. The CSA casualties were 6,945 infantry, 321 artillerymen for 13 guns, and they had 8,278 missing. In this particular run, Scales had 724 kills with 101 losses. Walton had 579 kills with 34 losses, and Loomis had 579 kills and 92 losses. Ideally, all 3 infantry would get 500 kills. Woods had 221 and he lost 1. Keep an eye on Woods because the CSA counterattack artillery can target him, so reposition him during the battle to avoid damage if you need to. Now, I had over 8,000 captures here, which is pretty ridiculous. It's more realistic to think that you're going to get closer to 3,500 to 5,000. When the battle starts, nearly all the CSA units on the field have 1841 Mississippi rifles. We want as many as those as we can capture. This includes the infantry units of McHenry, Law, Root, Burns, and Sill, plus Hexamer's dedicated skirmishers. These starting units are also smaller than the early reinforcements and the counterattack units. Hatch and Revere will be the only units in the counterattack in the second phase with Mississippi's, but they are much larger units. The most common weapon at Phlippi is the reboard musket. These units include Nelson, Ellis, Wheeler, Grant, Perrin, Parrott, and Scales. Although only 7 units carry them compared to 8 for the Mississippi's, these units are all part of the later counterattacks, so they're much larger in size. The 1842 Springfields are the least common. They're carried by Harlan, Spears, and Cutler, who are 3 of the early reinforcement units in Phase 1. Bear and Burns dedicated skirmisher units carry 59 carbines, but they're very small units. For the Allies, Colquitt, Stockton, and Schaefer have Mississippis, so try to manage their losses. Zook has 55 Springfields, and Milroy and Bruce both have Rebors. At a very minimum, you want to get out of this battle with enough 55 Springfields from Loomis and Zook's brigades to make a larger brigade of about 1,800 men, and enough Mississippis from Scales, Colquitt, and your captures to make another similar brigade, plus a 450-man skirmisher, although your army configuration may be different than what I'm going to build here. Capture artillery when you can, but even if you capture every single battery, it likely won't give you more than one extra 6-pound gun. My weapons recovery here were 1,900 Rebors and 1,500 Mississippis from rescues and captures, not counting the core units. Before I discuss the details of making my 8 units for distress call, I want to explain what makes this really work. A 1-star infantry or dedicated skirmisher unit commanded by a high-level officer should gain about 80 points of unit experience in the 4 battles leading up to Shiloh. High-level officers include any colonel the same rank as Woods, Scales, Loomis, or higher. In other words, a full-bird colonel with at least 50 officer experience points. Higher-level officers are even more effective and safer to use. The experience also includes the battle-led bonuses, so you must keep these officers safe. On average, they should gain about 20 unit experience points at distress call, another 30 at Bull Run, and 15 each at River Crossing and Logans Crossroads. This type of gain does not apply to recruit units. They must already be 1-star when they go into distress call. Although artillery can gain 80 unit experience points, they're more likely to get closer to the low 70s. Cavalry gains experience faster than any other unit type, but they can take heavy losses with one bad decision, so to compensate for their losses, I assume that they'll get between 65 and 70 unit experience points. Assuming that infantry and dedicated skirmishers will gain at least 80 points of unit experience, then they need to start with at least 1-star and 20 points of experience. Of course, 80 points of unit experience means you plan to never add recruits to that unit after it's formed, because recruits lower the experience, so they'll need to bleed down all the way to their 2nd star. Therefore, I recommend you allow some wiggle room. I prefer to start my infantry with at least 22 XP, skirmishers with at least 25, artillery with at least 30, and cavalry with at least 35 XP. It would be nice to give every unit a brigadier general to start the campaign, but there are limits on money, weapons, and officers. You might not even get any high-level officers in your academy to hire after Phlippi. As a result, you may need to settle for less, or start over, or re-roll the officers you need by reloading a game save just before Phlippi ends to cause the academy to reset until you get what you want. You can let your personal gaming ethics or house rules determine which of those you choose to do. You also have a limit on how many veterans are available to redistribute after disbanding the starting units, even if you didn't lose a single man at Phlippi. Because of that, you must be aware of how many recruits and veterans are needed to get a 1-star unit enough experience to make it to 2 stars by Shiloh. A new artillery unit requires 4 guns and 100 recruits. If you use Woods, Scales, or Loomis, you can give them 100 of Walton's vets and easily have 30 unit experience points. Higher level officers will need fewer guns. Since artillery requires the fewest vets for this, you can easily make more of them than any other unit type. Available weapons, money, and deployment slots then limit you. Dedicated skirmishers require 200 recruits to make a new unit. Depending on which officer you use, you'll likely need 200 to 250 vets to get them up to 1-star with about 25 unit experience points. Cavalry requires 250 recruits to make a minimum size new unit. Again, depending on which officer you use, it may take between 200 and 300 veterans to get them enough experience. Cavalry can be used to devastating effect in battle, but it's very expensive. So funding and a lack of weapons in the early game tends to limit how many you can build. Still, many legendary players prefer to go all in on using their vets and money to field cavalry. Infantry brigades need 850 recruits to create a new unit, and require significantly more vets than any other unit type to get to a 1-star unit with over 20 unit experience points. Therefore, the more infantry you put on the field, the fewer total units you can get to 2 stars before Shiloh. It's up to you to decide what configuration of unit types will be the most useful for you and your playing style. I'm just showing one configuration that I like to use that gets me 10 units to 2 stars before Shiloh. Another consideration is that Walton's veterans are all over 50 XP because they are 2-star quality, and the other vets are all 1-star veterans. Therefore, only adding Walton's veterans to a recruit unit will boost that experience much faster than the others. My goal in the first camp is to build 8 units with enough experience to get to 2 stars before Shiloh, while leaving some of Walton's veterans in the pool to make 2 more units after Distress Call. I will also leave 400 of Walton's vets in the pool to make a cavalry and artillery unit afterwards. If you only made artillery units, you could probably get away with 200 to 300 of Walton's vets, depending on which officers you're using. This particular configuration works well for me. You might have different priorities regarding which units you want. My 2 career points from Phlippi went into AO and training. If you don't plan to take dedicated skirmishers right now, you can leave AO at 2 and use the points elsewhere. 3 in AO allows 450-man dedicated skirmisher units, which is what you'll need when you add the veterans. Since Union recruit stats suck, I don't mind putting a point into training here. Due to how the calculations work, points in training really won't start to help until after Shiloh. Another point in logistics helps get heavy guns on the field earlier in the campaign, whereas points in medicine help preserve your vets, so you can make your own decisions there. Ideally, I got 2 brigadier generals plus Brewster and Brooks after Phlippi in the Academy for hire. If only 1 BG appears, Wagner can be used to take the place of one of the brigadier generals, and hopefully another colonel with at least 50 XP pops to take an artillery battery. I'll talk about a third alternative after Bull Run. I disband Woods, Scales, and Loomis and leave Walton together for now. I take the 55 Springfields and Gibbon with reputation points. This will give me a max morale penalty, but it doesn't matter right now. I will have morale penalties through Shiloh, and it won't make a difference in the early campaign. I create 3 minimum-sized infantry units. I prefer to give my corps to the lowest level brigadier general in the academy, and then use the 3 with the most experienced officers in my infantry brigades. In this particular campaign, I have Gibbon, my Avatar, and Torres from the Academy. I give Morel the Corps Commander slot. I gave Gibbon and my Avatar 55 Springfields, and Torres has Mississippi's. Now I add all of the veterans to each of the 3 infantry units until they're gone. More than likely, you'll give both divisions to lieutenant colonels because you can't afford more expensive officers in those roles. This is fine. Don't sweat the efficiency loss at this point in the campaign. Distribute the vets until each of the 3 units has 23 unit XP. Since Gibbon's the highest rank, he'll require the fewest. Your Avatar is probably going to require the second fewest, and the 3rd unit's probably going to require the most. Mine ended up with 1,825 for Gibbon, 1,835 for my Avatar, and 1,875 men for Torres. I like this setup because the infantry are usually 750 to 1900 in size and can easily still be over 1500 men by the time they bleed down to their second star, making them much more effective at Shiloh. Now I disband Walton. I create 2 minimum-sized artillery batteries. I give 1 to Walton and 1 to Wagner. Then I give them 3 more guns with Walton's vets. They should both be above 30 unit XP. Wagner has more experience, so his unit will have a little bit more XP. I create 3 dedicated skirmishers with Scales, Loomis, and Woods. 2-star dedicated skirmishers can be very effective, and I don't need to buy weapons for them. Whereas if I wanted to build cavalry or put more artillery on the field, I would need to spend money to buy their weapons. I then add 200 vets to each of the skirmishers to get them up to about 25 unit XP. I wouldn't go any lower than 23 unit XP for skirmishers. They will be your most difficult to get to 2 stars. If you see that they hit 25 unit XP before you hit the 450 man max, you can save some vets by alternating between recruits and vets until they're full. I give 2 of the units 61 Springfields after Walton was disbanded, and the 3rd gets Mississippi's. I try to leave at least 400 vets in the pool to create a cavalry and artillery unit in camp before Bull Run. I give my corps commander and my infantry accuracy perks. The artillery have a horse perk for the speed, and the skirmishers have pickets. Feel free to mix and match light infantry with pickets if you prefer. Light infantry gives you cover and speed. The way the calculations work in the mod, cover equals direct damage reduction, and the speed allows them to get away from charges. No supply will be needed for distress call or Bull Run. So here are some potential issues. If your units don't do much fighting in Phlippi because you wanted to preserve them, their experience level will be lower overall. Therefore, you may not hit the unit XP numbers above before you're running out of weapons. To help resolve this, you can try to give some of the 1-star vets to other units before disbanding Walton. Most likely, the skirmishers can take 10 to 20 each of the one-star vets without it becoming detrimental. You could also give Wagner a single gun with 25 one-star vets, but you might end up having to give him an 8th gun. When we go to Distress Call, I need to maximize kills while minimizing casualties. The player casualties to my core units were 29 killed, 123 wounded, and 14 missing. Without dupes, 7 allied units will be at the battle. Use them as your shield for your core units. Aim for 500 kills each for your infantry and skirmishers, although 450 is completely acceptable. More is better. Try for 200 kills with your artillery batteries, and 150 is also acceptable. The allied skirmishers and cavalry will carry 59 carbines, and we'll want to use them to make our cavalry back into camp. So try to reduce their losses. If the AI units both get carbines, we might not need to buy any weapons when we go to build our cavalry unit, but sometimes they get Cookin' Brothers or Colts. Capturing 1 or 2 of the artillery batteries can also help with new batteries in the future. All 3 infantry should be over 40 unit XP. If Walton or Wagner lost any men, I replaced them with vets. Skirmishers should be about 43 to 45 XP. I hired Brooks and Brewster from the academy. I made a minimum size artillery battery, and I gave one of them 5 guns with vets and a horse perk. The new battery, plus Wagner and Walton, should be about 50 unit XP at this point, give or take a few points. I created a minimum size carbine cavalry with the other officer. I was able to make a 500-man cavalry unit with 45 XP, and have enough vets left over to bring all 3 of my skirmishers back up to 450 men and give a few to my infantry. My cavalry has an accuracy perk. Since the vet pool here is mainly those left over from disbanding Walton after Phlippi, the stats are still all over 50, so topping off your other units isn't an issue right now. I emptied the money out of the supply wagon. Remember that the academy does not reset, so there's no need to buy a bunch of officers for later. 14 new officers will appear in the academy after Bull Run. However, the shop will reset and refill after Bull Run, so you might want to buy a few things. If your artillery batteries are at 8 guns or less, you won't need to buy artillery now, because between reputation points and what you can buy on the shop after Bull Run, you can swap one of them over to 24-pound howitzers before Shiloh, and another one over to 20-pound Parrots after Shiloh. Personally, I usually buy 150 Colts. With 1 in logistics, the Union will have 375 Colts to purchase after Bull Run, so if I buy 150 now, I can buy all of the other ones after Bull Run, and I can create a 500-man melee cav with pistols. I'll also buy the 59 Sharps rifles. There's only going to be 100 of them. But if I buy out the stock before each reset, one of my dedicated skirmishers can have them after Melvin Hill. Go ahead and buy whatever suits your army configuration with your remaining funds, knowing that you'll have to make 5 new units after Bull Run anyway. For Bull Run, once again, we're trying to minimize casualties and maximize kills and time in battle. I prefer to trip the phase 1 timer early to get the rest of my allies on the field to tank for my core units. Ideally, 2 of the allied infantry split, and I'll march them over to join my core forces to tank shots as my guys advance. Otherwise, I end up using allied detached skirmishers. You can harvest a ton of XP here, so everyone needs to get kills. Also, getting captures is nice, but every capture costs you kills. Whereas I focused on captures for Phlippi, Bull Run's all about getting kills. The allies and your killed enemies will get plenty of weapons even without the captures. And by battle, you will see me start turning off allied artillery and pulling back some of the allied forces to let my units do the shooting. I try to milk every minute of combat I can get, then capture whatever's left in the final minutes. This run was less than perfect in getting kills. Infantry, cavalry, and skirmishers should get about 1,000 each, and artillery around 400. On a really good run, I've had my infantry get closer to 1,500, skirmishers over 1,200, and artillery between 500 and 700. Managing condition for your core units is crucial. It sucks going into the last hour of battle and realizing half your guys are 50% condition because it reduces their damage output. Scales only had 822 kills because he kept getting tired in the last phase. Your detached skirmishers should be good for over 200 kills each, and those are then added to the parent's unit total at the end of the battle. You just need to protect them from fire so they remain effective. You must take at least one more division to field 15 units. I usually take AO to 5 here with my points from Bull Run, so I can take 4 divisions. So I hire 2 more lieutenant colonels for division commanders. Since Bull Run was fought with 1-star units, your vet pool stat should range between 30 and the mid-40s. However, I tend to have less than 75 vets in the pool. The next 2 battles are going to see a lot of no-star units on the field, so the Bull Run vets will be your last chance to top off a few of your current units. Typically, I top off the artillery if they've lost any men with the vets, and I leave my infantry and skirmishers to bleed down. I try to use the remaining vets to replace my cav losses. Unit experience after Bull Run should be over 70 for infantry, in the high to mid-70s for the skirmishers, artillery in the high 70s to low 80s. My cavalry is usually in the high 70s, so I can safely add some vets or recruits until they are pushed down into their low 70s. I take McDowell and Sherman with reputation points. Ideally, some high-level historical colonels like Porter, Henselman, and Franklin appear in the academy for hire. You can also use brigadier generals if you have them. Also, if you ended up using low-level officers to make some of your original units, if you had brigadier generals role in the academy after Bull Run, you can replace those officers with the brigadier generals. You'll lose 2 battles led, but you're going to find that those brigadier generals, if they're replacing like a lieutenant colonel or a low-level bird colonel, are going to give them much more experience to begin with, and they'll have 2 battles to get out of the penalty on battles led. I make 4 recruit infantry units. The high-level colonels can technically get a recruit to 1 star in a single battle if they're doing enough fighting, but most likely you're going to need 2 battles most of the time. Franklin and Porter have 2,250 men with 42 Springfields. Sherman and Henselman have 1,685 with rebores. McDowell has an 800-man melee cavalry unit that's all recruits. Do not worry about the efficiency penalty for unit size. However, to help lower it, I put the 5 new units under my highest division officers. My carbine cav, 3 skirmishers, and my 9-gun artillery under the second highest. My 3 existing infantry should have high enough unit command to be under a lieutenant colonel without any penalty, as well as Walton and Wagner's artillery units. As I said, I've made 4 divisions here, so I can try to get 2 more lieutenant colonels promoted to full bird colonel before Shiloh, but you could do this with 3. In addition, since you get to select the 15 units that deploy to river crossing, you can create some training brigades if you like without having your 2nd Corps created yet. Here I have 3 artillery batteries and 2 500-man skirmishers that will not deploy, but will get 2 to all stats and help their officer increase in experience. This is the first battle with no allies to provide supplies, so I'm taking 15,000. You can go ahead and fight river crossing however you wish. However, I usually put Franklin or Porter in the fortification and the other one right next to him since they're the biggest units. I then disperse the other rookie units between my veterans to keep them slightly forward to tank damage for the 10 units I'm trying to level up to 2 stars. You want to get as much experience as possible, so the best way to do that is to try to get a full clear at river crossing. Ideally, the AI will be somewhat aggressive so you can take out some of its units early. The AI artillery and usually about 3 of its infantry usually stay up on top of the hill. I like to sit back and wait for the AI to come down to me to start out. Then after the initial few waves of charges, I'll push forward. Eventually, I will have the AI surrounded in a U-shape, staying in cover with my skirmishers and cav to the far left, and infantry and artillery in the woods to the south and to the right of the northern VP. I don't always get the full clear, but I get extremely close. Again, this is all about getting the kills. Ideally 750 to 1,000 for your infantry, about 600 for the recruit units. Skirmishers want to be around 400 or more. 300 kills for your Napoleon batteries and 200 for the 6-pound battery. Cav should be around 600 or more. Just as a note, I've taken artillery batteries to 2 stars using 6-pounders, so don't dismiss them. What you lose in efficiency stat gains from kills, you more than make up for to increases in firearms and stamina due to the faster loading compared to the other gun types. Not saying that that's what you should use, I'm just saying if you're hurting for money, use the 6-pounders and don't worry about it right now. So looking at the pre-Logans Crossroads camp, all 5 of my recruit units received their first star after river crossing. The 1842 Springfield units tend to take heavy losses because not only are they taking damage for everyone else, but since they only have 340 range, they have to get closer to the enemy. However, now that they're at 1 star, you can usually add a lot of recruits to them before they lose it. After my first 10 units get to their 2nd star, these 4 infantry will be the next that I try to get to 2 stars. Other new units will do the tanking, but for now, these guys have to take the damage. I put my career point into medicine, and I bought the Logans rifles with reputation points. I give them to my lowest XP infantry unit that I'm trying to get to 2 stars, which in this case is Torres. I then upgraded 1, sometimes both, rebore units to 55 Springfields from Torres and whatever was in the shop. Sometimes I even end up buying a few. 2 of my infantry are 89 XP, 1 is 90 XP. Between getting their 4th battle led at Logans and the kills, getting the last 10 XP should not be an issue at all. Brewster's sitting at 98 XP, Wagner's at 95, and Walton's at 93. These guys should be able to sleep through this battle and get their 2nd star. My skirmishers range between 87 and 90 XP. They will need to do some work to make it, but I need to protect them because I likely won't be able to add troops to their units before going into Shiloh. I did top off my artillery with vets and increased Brooks' cav a bit. I formed my 2nd Corps with 1 division and tossed the training units over there. I mainly use training at these 2 battles just to help get some of the majors up to Lieutenant Colonel. I ran Porter and Franklin up to 2,350 men and gave them melee perks. Now, in Major General difficulty, I'd give all 4 of these units melee perks. But on Legendary, I gave melee to Porter and Franklin, and for the other 2 with 1,650 men, I give them accuracy perks. I added about 90 men to McDowell's cav, which pushed him down to a minimum XP to keep 1 star, but I like having the bigger cav unit. Logan's Crossroads is pretty much a repeat of river crossing. I aggressively go after the initial AI units to eliminate as many as possible before the reinforcements arrive. 9 times out of 10, I'll get a full clear. I monitor kills closely, especially for my skirmishers, since they need to get the most work to get that last 12 to 13 XP. Again, kills over captures, one last time. Torres's infantry and Scales skirmishers were the furthest behind on experience, so I worked them pretty hard. Unfortunately, my line broke during the battle, and Torres was left holding things together all by himself and taking a bunch of damage until I could get things back under control. Again, I was using the lower 1-star units to tank damage for those that I'm trying to get to 2 stars. Coming out of Logans, all 10 units got their 2nd star. Brooks' cav has 1 XP at 2 stars, so he just made it. In hindsight, I probably added too many recruits before Logans, otherwise he'd be a bit higher than that. The artillery units all have at least 7 XP at 2 stars. The infantry range between 4 and 9 experience at 2 stars. Scales is at 2 XP and Loomis and Woods are both at 3. Hopefully, this process will help you prepare for your first major test in the Union campaign on your way through Shiloh. Thank you so much for spending some of your valuable time watching today. I hope you found something useful for your campaigns, and I wish you much success, Generals.